Welcome back to PathMonk Presents. PathMonk is the AI for website conversions. With increasing online competition, over 98% of website visitors don't convert. The ability to successfully show your value proposition and support visitors in their buying journey separates you from the competition online. PathMonk qualifies and converts leads on your website by figuring out where they are in the buying journey and influencing them in key decision moments with relevant micro experiences like case studies, intro videos, and much more. Stay relevant to your visitors and increase conversions by 50% by adding PathMonk to your website in seconds, letting the artificial intelligence do all the work, and increase conversions while you keep doing marketing as usual. Check us out on pathmonk.com. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of PathMonk Presents. Thanks very much for joining us, and we're really excited for today's episode. Today we've got Dominique Gross, CEO over at Hart. Dominique, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Of course, we're really looking forward to chatting today. So before we dive into the nuts and bolts about everything that's going on from a marketing perspective over at Hart, why don't you give our audience a little bit of a blanket statement? Who are you guys? What's the company all about? And yeah, just give us a little background info.
Yeah, thanks. So Hart is a health IT company. We're based out of Kansas City, Missouri, and we really kind of help clients focus on interoperability in healthcare. We do kind of 4 key different things. We help clients move from one electronic health record to another. We help them store that data, so having archival of clinical and financial data. We also help clients stream data. So oftentimes they want to aggregate it, put it to population health. And then lastly, we help clients with like disaster recovery. So they have a backup just in case. So really kind of focused in a variety of different data management strategies for healthcare.
Okay, excellent. And I think that leads very well into my next question, which I think is going to be pretty straightforward. But in terms of the companies that you guys are helping, like, how do you serve them, and what are some of the main problems that you're solving for them, and like what can they expect from you? You know, basically, who's the audience, and what are the primary services that you guys are providing?
Yeah. We really serve healthcare in general, any sort of hospital, health system, physician clinic. We also serve some payers as well, or aggregators like accountable care organizations. Typically, we find most of our clients have a variety of different types of care sites. And the reason for that is because oftentimes they have like enterprise needs. So like I said, we kind of do different data management strategy supports. We're a middleware company, so we actually have kind of an underlying technology to serve them, which is a big part of what makes us most unique in this market. Our market's kind of interesting. It's been made up of, on one hand, kind of very like API to API pass-through type providers. And then on the other side, consulting firms do a lot of this work manually. So we're really interesting because we're technology first. But we do lots of things in a different way that's more useful from a data quality standpoint. We also make sure that people have a more robust amount of data as they're making these transitions, like I said, kind of in those 4 key use cases. Like a great example is I have a client the other day, he came to me and he says, "Oh, you do data migrations from one vendor to another." I said, "Yes." He said, 1, I didn't think that was possible. And 2, how they do it today is they basically move from one system to another. They print out the last 2 patient encounters. So just imagine that, going to the physician or the doctor, having the last 2 times you've seen them, they print it to PDF and they make that a reference point. And that's all the information that you have when you go to a new EHR. I was shocked by that. So we make it possible so that all your data is where it needs to be when it needs to be there. And things like that are pretty revolutionary to the market. So it's very exciting to be in this space and kind of broadening our customer footprint across just hospitals and health systems and all their network.
I'm pretty curious about one of the things that you mentioned, that there's also businesses out there that kind of do this not necessarily as a software, but as a service, right? And so how do you guys kind of position yourselves against people that may be doing this as a service? Because I'm sure they have their type of value propositions where, you know, having experts in the field who can do these types of things, but ultimately having a software that can do this makes things so much more effective and efficient, right? So yeah, maybe you can tell me and our audience, like, In terms of not how you specifically position yourself against your competitors, but more specifically against these service providers that are in this same space.
Yeah, they're usually like technology enabled service providers, which is super interesting. So they usually have like a user interface that sits on top of a bunch of manual work that's happening kind of behind the scenes. I always visualize this. I don't know why. It's like having somebody literally copy and paste something in Excel. You're copying and pasting something from one column to another, right? Well, obviously that takes a lot of time, people, and there's constraints in that, right? Like the average user or like human error is 5%. In
Mm,
healthcare, that 5% matters a lot.
yeah.
You can just imagine. So, you know, with those kinds of providers, I always like to talk about the fact that like we're a 12-year-old company. We've built up a library, kind of a lot like, you know, LLMs and AI. Like we've been building up a library of configuration for over a decade. We've got almost 200 EHRs that we've seen in our lifetime of different iterations that we've been storing. Like, hey, here's your configuration library, right? That kind of knowledge and intelligence can be applied today in a totally different way. And it drives efficiency, it drives quality, your data integrity, all of these kinds of things. So we tend to really focus in on having the most complete data at the highest integrity at really the lowest time, because all that just drives extraordinary efficiency. And so that's where we focus on. The consulting services is super interesting because they tend to do a lot more. They'll do like project management on things. And so really trying to hone in on our unique value proposition and then bring in partners where it makes sense to kind of fill those gaps of where they might consider a traditional consulting firm.
That's excellent. Yeah, the thing that you mentioned about kind of like the potential risk of human error. I mean, just imagine your electronic health records are the ones that are actually falling within that 5% of error, and
Yeah.
all of a sudden you're the ones that's screwed by this. So yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
let's remove that human error and just make sure that everything is flowing through one system that's guaranteed to work, right? So awesome.
Right.
I want to focus a little bit more on your audience because ultimately we're talking about marketing here. So maybe you
Mhm.
can tell us, how does your audience currently find out about you? I would imagine there's maybe some word of mouth for sure. You're probably doing some sort of organic SEO, maybe some paid advertising. Maybe you can tell us like what are some of those top acquisition channels where
Yeah.
people are coming to find you?
Yeah. Well, we have kind of a few different paths for acquisition, but I would say our primary is actually LinkedIn. We tend to
Mm,
find our core audience on LinkedIn. So particularly like CIOs, directors and vice presidents for health informatics, things like that. So a lot of the IT community within healthcare, we tend to find on LinkedIn.
mm,
So we have sort of a dual strategy with LinkedIn. One is paid advertising, and it's a very targeted approach. So it's very account-based marketing. We're literally loading lists and to say like, this is our core target audience. And then we also do organic posting to make sure that that's kind of more broadly available so that our own employees can reshare and partners reshare it, et cetera. So I'd say that's our really like core acquisition channel, which is kind of interesting. Um, Healthcare, I'm sure like most other markets, people have to see it many times before they take action. I think the average is like 7 times. You have to be
mm.
served something up before you even think about doing something. So that's a long time. So we do a lot on LinkedIn. We kind of run two core campaigns. One is more around just brand awareness, and then one is much more targeted and focused around products and services based on needs. And then after that, actually, we do a lot with partners. So we have a number of resellers and like consulting firms that we work with, right? And so we'll do a lot of partner marketing, whether it's through events and things like that. But that kind of co-marketing helps tremendously because it's sort of this multiplier effect versus just our own channels. I think sounds like you guys have a similar strategy in some
Mm.
ways, and then the rest of it kind of follows through. And generally, what we're trying to do is drive to our webpage for awareness and education because oftentimes in our marketplace, sometimes these things are just not understood or they don't even know it's possible. So we want to drive as much education as possible on that journey with like plain English.
Yeah, making it so that everyone can kind of understand what
Right.
you're talking about, because it does sound like what you're talking about with data migration, it can be a relatively complex topic, right?
Yes.
But making sure that the copy on any sort of marketing material is kind of, as we say, applicable to the lowest common denominator, right? Like
Yeah.
anyone, no matter who they are at any level, should be able to see and understand what you guys do.
Absolutely. Yeah, like we've done A/B tests and things, let's say for example with LinkedIn, and it's exactly the same copy but one word. And one will perform unbelievably high, the other one not as much, like the word transformation versus migration. Migration performs like crazy, transformation not so much, because it's just nebulous enough that it's like, well, what does that really mean?
Yeah.
So it's funny how things like that make such a big difference, but it's been great to have those acquisition channels because then we can better understand and really do comparisons, and really dial things in to be the most effective.
Yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from. I want to focus on your website a little bit for a question.
Mhm.
So, in terms of the website and how it plays into the overall client acquisition strategy, you're saying that LinkedIn is kind of like the primary acquisition channel at the moment, but ultimately it's going to drive people towards the website so that they can educate themselves in terms of the products that you guys actually offer. So, maybe you can tell us like what role does the website play in client acquisition and what sort of strengths or weaknesses do you currently have for the website?
Yeah, I think we talked about this. We're in mid overhaul of our webpage right this second, so it's near and dear to my heart for sure. Um, so the webpage should be pretty important, I think, generally, especially in our clients' education journey. There is a lot that comes in because we do have a fairly noisy market in terms of all these alternatives. And so really being super clear, because what I find is in our market, everyone sounds the same. They use similar words, they say they do similar things, and it couldn't be more night and day, actually, which is very funny. So if you look at 10 competitors of ours, they pretty much all say the same thing on the web. Their websites all do the same thing. They have the same kind of information. They have case studies, they have resources, they have very similar approach into how they actually engage with potential clients. So we're going through kind of a refinement right now to really be more clear and distinctive. And I think part of that journey is to really kind of get to that lowest common denominator on language and copy and things like that. But for the most part, our webpage is really focused around education, being super clear about the use cases. What do we do? How does it work? This kind of more granular level of information. I think like that kind of awareness journey from LinkedIn and the highest level information of just like, okay, here's a thing we can help you with. Here's a problem to solve. Now let's get more deep. And that's the job of the webpage. What we're exploring right now, though, is more around landing pages and how do we kind of make those conversions happen more effectively. And so I can see over time we're getting a lot more intentional about what that engagement path looks like through the web to get from education, consideration to action. And so that's where we're kind of exploring right now, but it has been a huge iterative process. I feel like we're constantly changing it. Probably everybody else doesn't feel like that, but it is because this like cyclical learning to action process with the web to say, okay, that didn't convert. So let's now kind of change up how we're doing that to really drive action. Or, well, maybe we already have a demo video. So like what is more valuable for actually driving a connection, a form fill, whatever it might be.
Yeah, really well said. And maybe there is an opportunity for PathMonk, wink, wink. But I did want to focus on one of the things that you mentioned, which is being very deliberate about what you guys are saying on the website. Because to
Yeah.
reference back to the question earlier, you were mentioning how there are these other people that provide like the services, right? And they do a little bit of everything, right? And it sounds like
Yeah.
you want to be very clear, like, this is the lane that we are in. This is what our tool can provide for you. We are not one of these people that does a little bit of this and a little bit of that. So to be
Right.
perfectly clear about the solutions that you guys are providing, as opposed to some other adjacent competitors who might do a little bit of this and that. So yeah, I
Yeah.
totally agree with where you're coming from on that. And A/B testing landing pages and A/B testing copy and language is, yeah, something that no one can avoid. And good luck with all that time. It's going to take you a while, especially as you launch a new website. Okay, so I want to move a little bit away from Hart and a little bit closer over to Dominique just as the marketing professional. As the CEO, I'm sure you have a lot of responsibilities over there, but specifically for today's call, I want to focus on marketing. So maybe you can tell us, in your own opinion, outside of Hart, just as a marketing professional, like what do you think does make a great converting website? Like, are there any sort of tools or tips or approaches that you might recommend?
Oh, lots. I've spent the vast majority of my career in marketing, so that's an easy one, I guess, in some ways. Um, I think for web pages, clarity, obviously,
Mhm.
having a very unique value proposition is another key point, and then something to provide a value, whatever that might be. So, one of the things that seems to work a lot is like checklists or guides, things like that. Something that's going to provide immediate value to your user on the other side, or something to engage with where they are already recognizing your level of expertise, your domain knowledge, and then have something to take away to say, oh, okay. And then hopefully with not too many hoops to get there, because I'm sure you know, and I know that like too many form fills, like fields, things like that, people start to lose interest. I know I certainly do, right?
Mhm.
If something is too laborious to even get through, they're probably not going to engage with you. So just constantly thinking about it from that, like I also think about it from my lens of like, if I'm a user, am I really going to fill all this stuff out? Or is that really a value, right? Like things just being slightly more transparent too. Like I watched this video actually the other day. I was signing up for um like webinar to learn something new. And at the end of the video introducing the webinar, there was a cost. And it was just kind of funny to be like, why did you make me watch a 3-minute video to get to the end only to tell me this is going to cost me like $5,000? So just being more transparent to people from the get-go of like what you're expecting, what you're trying to accomplish, and what the clear value proposition is going to be for them to actually take action, I think is super important. And having that also builds trust. It builds that kind of credibility to say like this isn't going to be kind of a bait and switch, to so to speak. People like the internet is so full of different kinds of information at this point. Like you have to have the fastest path to trust, credibility, and value. And I think if you can do that with your web page, whether it's like any given singular point of information or, conversion, whatever it is, I think that's just like super critical.
I 100% agree with everything you just said. And you also gave me an interesting idea. I know that the original question was, um, what do you think makes like a great converting website and what sort of tips do you have? But when you talked about that video you watched that took 3 minutes before it provided the price, the one thing that it led me to think is, okay, well, it thought that you were actually engaged and interested, and maybe from like an analytics perspective, it was actually starting to track you as maybe like a someone not necessarily in the awareness stage, but maybe someone in like the consideration stage, and like you're actually trending towards a conversion when you're ultimately just going to drop out. And I'm wondering, in a method like this, they probably have a huge drop off rate within the consideration stage because enough people stick
Sure.
around for the video only
Right.
to be told, oh, it's $5,000 once you actually get to the finish line, right? So why
Yeah.
not you be transparent up front, not just for the trust that you mentioned, but also so that anyone that is going through the buyer's journey is actually a real person who
Like
already knows and
qualified.
expect, yeah, a qualified lead already. So
Yes.
that's a
Fair
really
point.
interesting perspective.
Well, to that point too, like you're mentioning metrics and things, we do use like heat maps and things to see, where our prospective clients or visitors, you know, engaging, going to all those things. People always know, like make your most important information top of the page,
Mhm.
all those things, because it's deceiving. Like if somebody actually gets to the bottom, we're looking at things, like time spent on page, bounce rates, all of these kinds of things, right? We're looking at all the metrics. Which I think is kind of the same thing of what you're saying, where it's like, well, you think this person's super engaged with your page because they spent 15 minutes on your page, but in reality, they just left the browser open.
Yeah.
Like, what a a misnomer, and being able to kind of really sort through that. But I think, yeah, it all kind of comes back to most important information at the top, super transparent with the most high impact value statements to just make sure that that's all in alignment so that you really are kind of moving through the buyer journey in a predictable fashion that is qualified.
Which is ultimately what anyone wants, whether it's a sales team, you're looking for
Yeah.
conversions. Yeah, we don't need any of that garbage within the the leads, because ultimately they're, oh, I wasn't interested, I'm not going to schedule a demo, something like that. So
Yeah. Right.
interesting. So I'm sorry to kind of go off down that rabbit hole. I just thought it was a little bit interesting. Okay. So the next question, again, I said that I wanted to focus a little bit on Dominique, not necessarily Hart, right? So maybe you can tell us, as the CEO over there, what does a typical day look like? Like, what does your day-to-day focus or tasks look like?
Yeah. Goodness. Um, Well, that's a funny, like day to day, there's a lot of variation, I think, because the spectrum of work is often so different. And there's weeks where I'll be dialed in on a specific project. Maybe it's working with our contracts team and revamping something like that. The next week might be working on segmentation and how are we dialing in our go-to-market strategies so that we can kind of work through what that training is going to look like. Any given day or week has got kind of a pretty big variance, actually. Um, but I would say at the core of kind of every day, it's checking in with my leadership team, making sure we're tracking to our core priorities of the business. Are there anything that's come up as a blocker or, oh my gosh, we've got to deal with this? And then weekly kind of meeting with finance, our sales operations to kind of go through where we are with our sales funnel, how things are tracking there. I also meet with my marketing and my sales team every other week to do a combined meeting of like, this is what we're seeing in sales, this is what we're seeing in marketing. How can we pull these streams together to make sure we have consistency in our feedback, in our messaging, in all of these things? This is what's working, this is what's not. So we have kind of these like mechanisms for constant feedback, which is great. So in between kind of these sprints of working through bigger projects to help move the business forward, there's just sort of set teams and groups where we're meeting together to check in on different operational programs. And then I spend a fair bit of time with our board.
Oh, of
All the
course.
rest of the things, I have a handful of mentors I meet with on a regular basis to just keep my sanity, which is great. And, there's a lot that happens on the day to day, just like anybody else. I meet with clients a lot, spend a fair bit of time, probably about 20% of my time in any given week is working with clients, either current or future. Um, which is great. Honestly, I love that. I think it's been super helpful to see like what are people's needs, where are things going, how are things evolving in the marketplace. So that's been, I think, a really enjoyable part of the focus.
Yeah, a variety for sure, to say the
Yeah.
least. Okay, and the last question, just to kind of wrap up the personal section of the focus on Dominique. Um, I know everyone is always trying to kind of learn, grow, improve upon themselves, especially as whether it be business owners or just marketing professionals in general. Where do
Mhm.
you go to kind of learn and stay up to date? Like, are there any sort of places you go for consistent content or people that you like to follow? Like, yeah, where do you go to learn and stay up to date?
Yeah. Gosh, I have a pretty big spectrum, I would say. Funny enough, my Instagram feed is pretty much full of business stuff, which
Mhm.
is kind of comical. We're done with volleyball season now, so it's just all business stuff. Um, but otherwise, I would say it's funny how many things you get those little sound bites of like guidance and things through all of the various Instagram kind of like leaders and people, Cody Sanchez, all these folks who kind of are providing great messaging around, what it takes to lead a business successfully, things to consider. Outside of that, I follow an operators podcast. It's 5 operators. They're all CEOs. They've all run and grown small businesses. So that's super helpful. I follow actually a fair few podcasts, which helps tremendously. Um, Always interesting to hear. And then I read a ton of books. I probably read at least a book a week, at least. So I'll probably read, I don't know, 100-ish books a year. And
Mm.
Some of those are business books, which is great. And so I'm constantly getting book recommendations. I'll share them with my team. My leadership team also sends podcasts. So we kind of have this like running text string with various podcasts sending back and forth of like, oh, this is a great one. Listen to this week. And then, like I said, I've got some mentors. So I find a lot of value from just other CEOs, other people in leadership capacities that have gone through, similar things that I'm going through. So I get a lot of learning out of that, just being like, hey, how do I handle this situation? This has never happened before. But I'm constantly like in learning mode. I think you have to be if you're in a role like this. And marketing is constantly changing. So marketing on that side, like I actually get a lot of insight from HubSpot. HubSpot's got some good newsletters, which you probably wouldn't think about, but I do like to use them as a reference. I actually do a lot of like reading and things through Harvard Business Review. They've got a great weekly newsletter. I do a lot of domain specific stuff like Health IT News, Becker's Health, all these kinds of things. So it's kind of across the board, but on more like marketing specific trends, going to things like, like Harvard Business Review, all sorts of stuff. Like I have a kind of litany of newsletters I go through to be like, all right, what's trending this week? Like what's changed? Okay, now our Google SEO models changed, right? Now how do we
happens
right?
all
All
the
the
time. Yeah.
time. Honestly, I think that's part of what makes marketing so hard these days versus even like a couple years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. These algorithms and things weren't changing quite like they are today. Like even cold emails, I had no idea the amount of effort that has to go into like warming up an email, all these kinds of things. What's the process to do that, right? From a marketing standpoint, you think, oh, outreach, just call them. It's totally not that simple.
Not anymore. Not anymore.
Not anymore, right? And so there's so much you have to stay on top of. And I would say I lean into a lot of our experts to do some of that. And as I learn new things, I'm like, oh, watch this video, right? Like, okay, this seems like it's useful for us. But it's a constant state of learning. I don't know, what's your favorite marketing like email or educational newsletter?
I wouldn't necessarily say newsletters. That's not something that I follow very much. What I tend to use for a way to kind of like stay up to date and learn, a lot of, how do I put this? Number one, sometimes you can just learn the most just going on YouTube, right? Like there's
Oh, yeah.
so much information on YouTube where once you find like the right channel, like there's a lot of content that you can consume.
Yep.
You can learn so much from a video as opposed to just reading something. And some people, like me personally, I learn so much more from like watching something as opposed to reading it. Um, um, I also learn a lot from publicly available Slack channels.
Oh,
So yeah, so for example,
I hate Slack. Oh my gosh, personal deficiency right
yeah,
there.
but as the agency partnership manager here within PathMonk, I'm a part of a few different partnership related channels within Slack, and if I ever have a question that is something I've never run into before, pop it in there, and there's thousands of people that could potentially answer and say, "Oh, I've run into that before, and here's how I handled it." So yeah,
Interesting.
things like this end up being really valuable tools, trying to not just utilize the network that I've already established and the people that I work with and speak with on a regular basis, but also these types of like online communities where you can really get some valuable information from people you've never even talked to once in your life. And as long as we're kind of all looking to provide helpful resources and help each other, I mean, ultimately you can get really good feedback that way. So yeah, I would
Cool.
say those are the tools that I traditionally utilize.
I love it.
Yeah.
I do use YouTube as well sometimes. Like if I'm trying to set something up, I do a lot
Oh,
of,
how-to videos. Yeah, it's the
yeah,
best.
100%. You're absolutely spot on with that. That's a good
And
call.
even from a marketing material, what we've realized here at PathMonk is we're starting to include more and more and more videos within the marketing materials that we're providing, right? Like instead of trying to have people read about why this is something that they should respond to, just watch this video that either we've had AI generate for us or we took like 2 minutes to kind of just build it ourselves. And
Yeah.
ultimately any type of content that maybe at a maximum is like 90 seconds, but still gets your point across about what you can provide and the values that you can establish and the problems that you can solve, we feel like that'll get some interest much more than, this paragraph that you should read. So
Great.
it's an
Sure.
interesting perspective, and yeah, definitely something we could spend a lot more time on. But I want to move into the final section of the conversation, which is a
Yeah.
little bit more of like a rapid fire round. So the next couple questions are going to be a little bit more playful and thought provoking. But what we're really looking for is the first thing that comes to the top of your mind, so that we can do it in a little bit of a rapid fire manner. So are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay, great. So the first question in this section you are already kind of hinted at, but what's the last book that you read?
Oh, um, what is it called? It's like entrepreneurial leadership, something like that. It's from the Netflix CEO. He said, read the first 89 pages.
Okay,
A good
nice.
one. Yeah.
I'll have to figure out what that is and add it to my list.
Yeah.
Okay, next one. If there were no boundaries in technology, and I
Ooh,
mean, like snap your fingers and anything is possible, what would be the one thing that you would want to have fixed for your role as a marketer today?
ooh, as a marketer, um, probably all the algorithms. I don't know. I would like those to just go back away,
Mm,
like stop limiting all this stuff in the behind the scenes that nobody really understands anyhow, right? I don't want any of my marketers to have to be an expert in algorithms. I want them to be experts in like actual customer needs and what is going to matter to them and how do we provide good value. Like that's what I want a marketer to care about and to focus on. And now we've kind of gotten to this place where it's like, oh, well, each one of these has its own special sauce, its own algorithm. Like we're
yeah,
trying
there's so
to,
many data points that you have to make sure
yeah,
that you have a specific point for. Like if you're not approaching points 1, 2, 3, but you're missing out on 4, 5, and 6, like it's not going to perform as well because the algorithm demands all of them.
right.
That's a really
Yeah.
good point. We want to
That's
focus
my
on Yeah, we want to focus on what matters, not necessarily the technical aspects behind it and how it will perform.
right. Like, God forbid we go back Mad Men days, but honestly, there's some love, of that style of just like actually being like clever, creative, and all of the things that make marketing really fun.
I get it. I agree. Okay, next one. If there was one repetitive task that you could automate out of all the things that I'm sure take up a lot of your time, what would be the one thing that you would want to have automated?
Workflows,
Care to expand?
building, there's so much decision point that goes into building workflows, both technically and kind of like through teamwork.
Mhm.
Specifically, let's say, for example, like HubSpot or any CRM or any marketing tool, whatever it might be, all the like back end workflows take so much time, energy, and thought to think through things in a like really impactful way. You don't want to triage a client in a way that's going to turn them off from their buying journey, right? So I would say if we could automate that in a much more like efficient way so that it's, like that'd be a great application of
Yeah,
AI. Build this
you
workflow.
can imagine the workflow, but
Yeah.
the process of making it a reality is time consuming, right? So
Yes.
submit a prompt, click a button, the workflow is established for you.
Done.
So
Magic.
that's a good one. That's a really good one. Okay. And the last question on today's list. What is one piece of advice that you would give yourself if you were to restart your journey as a marketer today?
Ooh. I would say spend as much time with clients as possible, or your future clients even. Um, Somebody shared that with me much later in my marketing journey, and I didn't necessarily understand it at the time. Now I understand it much differently, but it kind of comes back to this core thing of like, from a marketing standpoint, you're only as effective as you understand your client needs and their problems to be solved and the value you provide. So I'd say spend as much time with those or like deeply understand. So if you can't spend time with them, do research, do whatever you need to really get as close to your client as possible or your target market or however you define that, because um, it's really hard to understand how you differentiate yourself in a marketplace if you don't understand what their needs are to begin with.
Really well said, really wise words. Well, Dominique, I just want to say thank you so much for joining the show today. We really enjoyed having you on. Thank you so much for providing your insights. Before we sign off and before we get going, why don't you just give our audience one more time, tell us about Hart. Who are you guys and how can they find you?
Yeah. Well, you can find Hart at hart.com, pretty straightforward, or on LinkedIn. We're Hart Inc. And Hart is a health IT company. We specialize in interoperability and helping our healthcare clients meet their data management goals.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dominique.
Thank you. Great to
See,
have you.
see you.
Great.
Bye-bye.
All right. Take care.